So yeah, I'm Sharon, and my company name is Miss Menopause. So I think people think I'm a middle-aged Mr. Man character, but I'm not really. Although I am, I can't believe it. But this year I'll be 54 in June. I can hardly believe it, which means that in 6 years' time, if I make it, I'll be 60. I don't even know how that's happened. Life's whizzing past me. So I'm as surprised as anybody to be a menopause educator these days. And what do I like to do? Well, I like laughing, eating and drinking. That's what I like to do. That's like my hobbies and interests. So I like nice food. I like to laugh a lot and spinning around occasionally. It doesn't come amiss. So like I say, I'm a pretty simple soul. I don't go to the gym. I mean, you can tell. I don't really like exercise so much. So yeah, I work hard, but I'd also like to veg out. So I don't think personally enough people can relax as in the art of doing nothing. So choosing to do a bit of nothing, phone away, bit of daydreaming, a bit of whatever, or watching absolute rubbish on the telly, or putting some music on, having a dance about. Like I say, that's about me. So I suppose the thing for me, when I looked at all the stuff that you sent me, the thing about me was it was all about appearance and the way that I looked. So when I was about 13, I was in the early 80s, this was. So I always wanted to have like a funky haircut. And my mum was like, you're wearing Clark shoes and you were looking like this. And this is just the way it's going to be. I wasn't allowed to dye my hair or anything. And so I suddenly had this brainwave that I wanted to become like a hairdresser. And then she wouldn't be able to stop us doing anything like that. So that's what I did. I got a Saturday job at a hairdresser's and I loved it. And I was kind of, I suppose, probably looking back, fairly confident in myself. Like I knew what I liked, I knew what I wanted. And I wasn't really conforming to what anybody else was wanting. I knew what I liked and that was it. So I remember my mom coming back in the guy who ran it was like, shall we cut your hair? And I was like, yes, yes, yes. And he gave us what I can only describe as a flat top. So you're either going to know what I'm talking about or you're not. It was a bit like a quiff, a rockabilly haircut, but really short back and sides, but on a girl. So that was the first thing. So I went into school and school were like, what on earth have you done to your hair? And it was like, well, it's totally amazing. It's like, look at me. And so school didn't really like that. And then as I was a Saturday girl for about two years after that. And I'm so old, I went to something called the Tube. I was able to be the audience in the Tube. So I used to dress up in totally crazy clothes and make all my own outfits to the point where I was coming towards the end of my exams at the age of 15, 16. Actually, I'm so old, I actually left school at the age of 15 because I wasn't quite 16 until about a week after I left school. I sound like something from Beamish Museum. And so just before that, so originally what I was going to do was I was going to go and stay on at sixth form. I didn't quite know what I wanted to do, but I was going to do what lots of people think they should do your A levels. That's what I was going to do. I was always been in the top sets. So I'd always been fairly good at my schoolwork. But there was other things that had happened to me, mostly around my appearance at school, because I was an easy target. I've always been a rule follower, despite what lots of people think. So when the big chunky things that matters, I've been brought up to respect authority, do the right thing, not the easy thing. And I remember this one day you had to wear stud earrings, all of this stud earrings thing. But I bent the rules a bit and I found these zips. They were little white zips, but studs, they were dangly little zips. And I remember that one of the head teachers chased me around called the quadrangle because it spotted these non-conformity earrings and made me take them out. Yet there was other girls in the school who seemed, and boys, I suppose, who seemed to be like doing really terrible things, but I think they were a bit frightened of them. So I felt like I was always a bit of an easy target because I was really rule conscious. And I was like, I didn't want to get into trouble. That wasn't my thing. So I'd had all these little funny things happen. So in the end, I thought, do you know what? I don't want to stay on at school because I'd also started to become bullied by other girls in the school. And a lot of my friends were quite frightened. Now, I wasn't ever frightened of them per se, but I used to do that. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to engage in conversation with you, which made them even madder. So I was out this one night with a couple of girlfriends, raking around the streets as you did way back in the 80s, not a lot to do. And it turned out that 6 girls followed us home and jumped on me like I had to have stitches in my head. And this was all because of the way that I looked, They did, you love yourself, you think you're amazing. I was like, didn't at all. I was just being my best self. I was just being me. So after all of that, the school weren't that great about that either. So the final days of being, you know, coming up to my exams and thinking, will I go to sixth form? I thought, you know what? I don't want to be here. I don't feel like I fit in. I feel like I'm being picked on for ridiculous low-level reasons. So the guy at the hairdresser thought I was great. And I thought, oh, more ways of having better haircuts. So I said to my mum, right, well, I'm not going to stay on at school. They were a bit gutted, like, how, you know, what are you going to do that for? Like most parents would be. I just said, no, I'm going to leave school and I'm going to get a job, and I'm going to get a job in this hairdresser's because I could do me laughing, eating and drinking. I could dance around. I was sweeping the floor, let's be honest. But just before I was to sit my exams, all of this hair extension stuff came out. Now, I'm not talking about hair extensions like you see that nowadays, which are all look like real hair. I had all of my hair shaved off and I asked for red and white hair extensions. So I was like, that's what I want. So I didn't think about consequences from a school point of view. I was like, well, in a week's time, I'll have sat all my exams and I'll have left and I'll be working here. This is where I'll be working. And I went into school to sit my last few exams, and I got called in to see the head teacher, who said, it was like, well, what do you think you're doing? Who do you think you are? This is totally outrageous. And they were on the brink of going to almost expel me because of the way that I looked. So in the end, they said, you can stay and do your exams as long as you tie your hair back off your face, because they were like all hanging. I mean, I could send you a picture. They're like hanging all over my face. Thought it was amazing. So I thought, right, well, you didn't tell me how I had to do that. So I went off. I distinctly remember I went off to Miss Selfridge's, and it was when neon stuff was out, and I bought this biggest neon chiffon scarf, and I tied it up like a massive quiff with the biggest bow that you could ever imagine. I was like Lady Gaga, well, long before that. And I went into school like that, and they were foaming. They were absolutely livid. And I just thought, you know what, that was the start of it, all about the way that you look. I hadn't been a bad person, like I say. I'd been in all the top classes. I'd done all my homework. I'd turned up. I wasn't ever off sick. I wasn't late. I wasn't a bad pupil. But it was all about the way that I looked. And maybe the way that I behaved as well, because I think a lot of people will say about me, oh, Sharon, you know, you're really honest. You just say it how it is. Well, I suppose on reflection, that's the way that I've always been. And I haven't really changed so much. But as I grew up, and so I didn't stay in hairdressing very long. It wasn't really the career for me. When I realised I was working longer hours than my dad for 50 pence, I thought, well, that wasn't really the smartest of moves, you know, and despite the fact that I loved it, you know, it wasn't really going to be the best thing for me. So I drifted about and did different things. And then I ended up in this crazy place. It was a publishing company. I call it the poor man's Wolf of Wall Street. It was full of like the most crazy people that you could ever imagine. Of some one's we really best friend now, and the rest of the people in the world like pretty specially crazy. And that was good. So I actually became a leader in that business. When I say leader, that's very loose leaf. There was no induction, no training, there was no HR, there was nothing. It was like, you seem to be better than those people at that, so can you be in charge of them? So that was an initiation by fire. And I never felt that, you know, I think there's sometimes think about gender that it held you back. I've always, I suppose, been confident enough in my own self a lot of the time to think, you know, if I'm good at that, well, somebody will notice me. I'm not about ego. I'm like, I'm just going to get on with it. And that's what happened. I got promoted several times and they gave me this job in charge of others, which probably wasn't a good idea. So the first thing that I ever had to do was to talk to somebody who had a personal hygiene problem. And that was me. I was in my early 20s and this was a woman who was in her 40s. Well, let me tell you, that was probably one of the most uncomfortable things ever because I hadn't had any training. It was just absolutely awful. And so, you know, although it was a crazy place, it was probably good because it was crazy because nobody cared. It was all about be yourself, do your own thing. And that really suited me. And then I ended up getting into bigger business. And I think bigger business is really, for me, it's really interesting. And I've been reflecting a lot on this because I think I'm unemployable now because what I say about what I do now is I'm totally out the box. Nobody's putting me back ever. And I'm the me that I want to be. And if others don't like me, do you know what? That's absolutely fine by me because I, at the ripe old age of nearly 54, know that I quite like myself. So it's not this ridiculous stuff about, I know I'm quite American, you know, you've got to learn to love yourself. I say in the UK, if you can look in the mirror, and this isn't about, you know, physical attributes, it's about looking at yourself and going, what, in a Geordie way, do you know what? I think I'm all right. I think I'm all right. No, I'm not perfect. I'm going to get it wrong. I'm a human. I'm fallible. It's not going to go great all the time. But in the main, I think, Sharon, you're all right. But it's took me quite some time to get there. But when I was in bigger business, I think terms like professionalism, like what on earth does that mean? Well, what I usually think that means now on reflection is, don't be anything like yourself. Be like the image that we've decided we want our people to be like, and try and fit yourself into it. And of course, that's what I did, because that's what I believed, you know, respect, you know, your elders, respect authority. That's how I've always been brought up. So that's what I did. And you don't notice, do you, that you've shaved a bit off and you've forced yourself into a little corner a bit, because these things normally happen over time. So it's a drip effect, and you don't actually notice that you've changed, you've conformed, you've dumbed yourself down, you've done all these things. Because people would sometimes say to me, oh, you're really happy. I'd go, oh, what makes you say that? Well, because you're singing. I was thinking, I sing everywhere, anywhere. Like, no, I'm not saying I'm good at it, you know, or I might have a little dance. You know, when it got to a point where I was a senior leader in a FTSE 100 company, people were like, just dancing, like, oh, it's a bit bizarre. And then I think we've got these other terms, haven't we, in business, especially big business, especially as you normally climb up the greasy pole. You get told that we're going to go through feedback mechanisms. Now, feedback, what I think about feedback these days is most people like to weaponize it. So my philosophy is feedback is a gift for me, from me to you. But everyone has to remember, feedback is my personal opinion. It's my lens that I see out of. It's just my opinion. It's not gospel. And if you don't want to take it, absolutely, that is your prerogative. But I think when you're wrapped around in business, that, you know, you talk about 360 feedback, and we're going to go through these processes, and you're going to have a psychometric test, and it's going to tell you that you're not quite right at this, and you're not good at that, and can you look to be better at that? And I used to listen to this and think, these people know better than me. I must try and change this part of me. And it was awful, really, when I reflect on it, because I was changing little bits over time. And it was in it, I didn't realize it was making me unhappy, but it was making me unhappy. And then I was quite good at what I did. And then I'd get promoted, and then I'd get more money. But because I was unhappy, I'd go and treat myself to like a ridiculously expensive handbag, because that was my treat for being quite, you know, unhappy, but not enough to keep me off work. And can then keep getting more feedback about, oh, Sharon, you know, we think you should behave like this. We don't think you should look like that. You know, and I always remember quite early on in this one particular company, this director called me into the office and said, it was a woman, Sharon, you don't wear makeup. And I really think that you need to do that in this office. And this is quite some years ago. And I was like, really? So I listened and I took it. And I think I wore lipstick a couple of days, and I thought, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. So again, I've never kind of in some respects conformed, because why should you? And I find the whole subject matter about diversity really, really fascinating, important, and loads of other things wrapped up in it, because each and every human out there is diverse as the next one. It doesn't matter who you are. And I keep hearing, you know, we want people to be their best selves, we're inclusive. Most companies aren't at all. What they want you to be is their version of what good looks like, not be the you you're meant to be. And that I found that really crushing over the years. And then I found that the people that made me feel the worst was never me about me. You know, I could have gone out, had far too much to drink, and woke up with the fear. Of course, we've all done that, I'm sure, from time to time. I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about people continue to give me feedback about me, my behaviour, you know, how I was, and me kind of soaking it up and thinking, oh, okay then, and becoming more and more unhappy, but not appreciating that. And it was just awful, to the point where I would say I've only had real mental health issues at work. And I've only been at work, I'm pretty robust, because like I say, I feel I'm pretty blessed in terms of my personal circumstances. You know, no one's died in the wrong place. I haven't had any major trauma. I think I'm really, really lucky to be the age that I am and not have you know, stuff like that happen. But yeah, like, you know, you need to change. And then you'd get this feedback and you'd think, okay. No one ever told me I couldn't accept it. You know, people give you this stuff and you have to take it. That's what I thought. And I would think, oh, I don't really like that. That's horrible. It's making us feel unhappy and I'm going to have to try and change. And then it got to a point, you know, just in my mid-40s where I thought, you know what? Sod you all. I'm quite happy with me. And I think for anybody who's listening, if I was to give any advice, that the thing that transformed me was somebody asked me, I was on a training course actually, and they didn't do a very good job of it, but I went off to do some more. I became an NLP practitioner. I learned more, did more research. And it was talking about values. You know, what are your values? And I was like, oh, it's like ABC, because that's what you think you do. You just reel them off. And it was like, and that was all we talked about. And then I started to learn more and more and explore more about values. And I talk about values a lot in some of the work that I do and say, and this is how I view values. I view my values as a bit like if I was the stick of rock, and if you were to like break a bit off, you'd find my words of my values going through me like a stick of rock. And I've realized that my values have got a shape. And I always say, when you know who you are, and I often say to people, has anyone asked you, like, who is Sharon? Who are you? And they go, well, what do you mean? I'll say, well, I don't mean like the mom, the sister, you know, the daughter. I mean, has anyone ever asked you, who are you? And people go, no, I haven't. No, they haven't. So I've learned over the years, and didn't take, you know, hours, days, or weeks. It took me months and probably years to figure out these words in me that make me up. And the big dirty one that overarches everything is this is my intention anyway, my value of making a positive difference in the world. Now, I'm not going to get it right all the time, am I? Because I'm a human, I'm fallible. And then the other ones that kind of sit underneath that, which are all equal to me, are trust, honesty, integrity, respect. And so I'm trying to live my life. They are I always say my values are my rule book. So whenever I'm not sure what to do, I can check inside because I've got them with me all the time. So it's up to me how much or how little I choose to compromise now, because I'm in charge. And that's where confidence lives for me. Knowing who you are, knowing what you're about, and deciding how much or how little you're going to change or not. And that's where people lose their confidence, because often people are trying to vicariously live, I call it being externally referenced, by trying to please everyone else. And I say, this isn't arrogance. This is about, you have to know who you are, and then you have to learn to put yourself first. And we've all heard people use this analogy, and I've used it for years. Put your own oxygen mask on first, because if not, you're in danger of what I call being a dead hero. So you're going to be dead on the ground. So you've chosen, you know, to put other people's masks on. You know, your kids haven't got a mom. You know, your husband hasn't got a wife, because you're dead on the floor, because you chose to give the oxygen to everyone else. Is that what you want? And often people will say to me, well, no, it's not what I want. It's for what you're behaving like that for. So my intention is, whatever I do for however long my life is now, long or short after, you know, from now, is the first person I'm going to try and please is me, because I believe that if I can help myself and I have everything I need, then I can then help others more, not less. So I'm always trying to put me at the top of the list. So then, like I say, I've got my oxygen and I can help others more. And I'm just totally comfortable with the me that I am. And I've realized over the years, and I knew that fairly early on, I'm like, Marmite, some people are going to like me and some people aren't. And you know what? That's all right, as long as I think I'm all right. You know, and then there was other things, probably lesser so, but things like accents. So I am a proud Geordie lass. But one of my first jobs was in this crazy place where I worked in publishing. It was all working on the phone. So what I've learned is to be understood is what you're aiming for, but not to have, like, you know, a cut glass, oh, hello, darling, accent. Well, I think, again, maybe in the early 80s, maybe not so much now, or maybe just as much now, because I'm always fascinated here in the Northeast. I feel like a lot of younger people mix up accent with intelligence. So they'll say things like, I've got a mum. And I'm like, to me, that's what you put under your arms. I'm a Geordie and I'm proud of where I come from, and I've got a mum, because that's what Geordies have. They have mums. You know, you can have mummies, you can have them, you know, Welsh, all over. And I think I feel like a lot of younger people are thinking, oh my goodness, I have to be like those other people and we have to speak like that. So I used to change, you know, accent, tone, and like, oh, well, you know, be more precise and less Geordie. Well, now I'm like, nah, this is me. You know, this is how I speak. As long as you can understand me, you know, I've spoken at some real, you know, high-level conferences. I've spoken, you know, some real big brand companies I've worked with, you know, and I'll talk about me mum. I'm not going to say any mum because I'd like to think you understand what I mean, but I'm going to just say what I've got to say because I'm a proud Geordie and I'm proud to represent my region and my area, and I want people to know that's where I come from. So I suppose if I had to sum it up, you know, learning about and being comfortable with the me that I am, I haven't done badly from it. Yeah, I've had some episodes of, you know, I remember once crying in the car for several weeks because I felt so bullied by a line manager of mine, you know, and literally never having this instilled in me that, you know, you're a hardworking person, you come from a hardworking family, you don't take time off. And again, none of this mental health stuff, this is, you know, 10 years plus ago, and thinking, you know, you've just got to go into work and, you know, crying in the car and shouting, I was going to swear, Sharon, you are effing fantastic, like trying to tell myself I was fine when I really didn't feel fine at all. But there was no mechanism at that point to share because you would look weak. You would look, you know, I was a senior person, I was a woman. That wasn't expected. Nobody talked about mental health and well-being at all then. And I can't even imagine, you know, in the work that I do now through menopause, at that point, you would never have shared that, you know, that sort of information, those stories. So, you know, my point is, if you can learn who you are and learn to accept and even quite like who you are, then you'll have much less bad days because you'll kind of feel maybe a bit invincible. And I remember setting up Miss Menopause. Well, never, you know, I'm as surprised as anybody that I, you know, talk about the menopause in the workplace. That is not what I, you know, if you'd said, Sharon, you're going to get passionately involved with that, I go, don't be ridiculous. That's got nothing to do with me. And I remember going to see some quite eminent people in my life who were kind of, I'd call them business mentors. And there was a couple, it was a guy and a woman. I remember going down, it was down Teesside Way, and this person had a really great job, CEO of this really large charity, I won't say who, and I was saying that, I think I might be a bit mad or I'm a genius, my tongue's firmly in my cheek when I say that, by the way, because I can see that there's this stuff about menopause, and it's, because menopause nearly killed me because I fell asleep at the wheel of my car when I was driving at speed. Now, thankfully, not enough to swerve, I crashed the car. And I was like, it's causing real problems to me. I can see if it's happening to me, it's got to be happening to everybody else. And then learning that, you know, this 100% of reproducing females and this outrageous statistic. And I'll never forget this person. I was sat in her office. She went, well, I don't know why anybody would talk about that in the workplace. If I needed to find out information, I'll just do my research. So I don't see how that's a viable thing. And then I had this guy who, again, really runs 3 or 4 successful businesses in the Northeast. But again, it's heavy industry, and you would say it was mostly men. And I always remember, and he said, well, I don't see how that would fit much in businesses like mine. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, and I'll never forget, he said, we only have 2 women. And I said, 2 whole real live human women? You have 2? He went, yeah. He went, I said, well, I'm just going to make up a story, because they had about 50 people on his payroll, and 2 real life human women. And I said, well, let's just call them Sharon and Louise. I said, and I'm being really stereotypical here, but I'm making up that I imagine Sharon and Louise have probably, we'll call them back office, they're probably payroll administrators, probably that's what they're doing. And I was like, yes, have you met them? I said, no. I said, and let's just imagine that they've been with you for several years. And he went, yeah. I said, and I imagine if they have, that their work is so brilliant that you don't even notice how good it is, because the wheels just turn and things happen. And he was like, yeah. I said, so let's just imagine either Sharon or Louise wake up one day feeling a bit meh and start to feel anxious and start not to be able to sleep, and maybe can't remember the name for this. It's a thingy, it's a thingy, they've put their keys in the kettle. And maybe after a very short period of time, because they don't know this is potentially could be menopause related, they leave. How would you feel about that? He went, you're joking. He went, well, I couldn't afford that to happen. So my response was, well, I know you've only got 2 whole life human women, but do you not owe it to Sharon and Louise and perhaps their line manager to help them be educated and understand what may happen to them and their bodies and their minds? I said, but more importantly, most people, I would say in the UK, again, I'm being really, really generic, you could say, would identify as male and female in the majority, and would still say the majority would identify as heterosexual. So I said, all those other 48 men, I said, women are insidious. We're everywhere. There's literally no escape. I said, so they could be living in very close quarters with those women, but they'll be friends, family members, and they are colleagues. So do you not owe it to those people to educate them about what might happen? Because, you know, over the years, some of the most profound feedback I've had has been from men who would say by their own admission, I didn't want to learn about that. I don't see what that's got to do with me. But then realizing, you know, when I tell them about this stuff, that, oh my goodness, you know, I always say learning about the work I do, it can't harm you, but it could certainly help you. So I think we've just got to get around this. Everybody's unique, everybody's different. And where can we find a space to be our best selves? And then pre-pandemic, now I wasn't saying this to be facetious to this particular person, but I was fascinated. So I was in this networking event, like I say, pre-pandemic, in a room with, you know, several people. And this person who had helped to, one of the people who had helped to organize this event was going on about how much, it was a she, can't just happen to be a she was like, oh, I just love my job. It's amazing. I can be my absolute best self here. And I wasn't being awkward. I was genuinely interested. And I just said, oh, no, that's amazing. I'm delighted to hear that, because that's when you've hit the sweet spot. When you find the place, wherever that might be, where you can just be the you you're meant to be. So I just wanted to know more. And I just said, do you swear? She said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I don't mean like you're a potty mouth. I mean, but in your life, do you use swear words? Because I'm going to swear now, sometimes there's no better word than bollocks, is there? Like, it's a great descriptor, isn't it? It's a good word. And most of us would, you know what that meant. And I said, do you swear just in everyday life? She went, well, yeah, from time to time. Doesn't everybody? I said, so do you ever swear at work? She was like, oh my goodness, I could never do that. And I said, well, you're not being your best self, are you? So this whole thing about professionalism. It's almost like we shed the real us at the door. And we go, oh, a swear word, we could possibly say that. Well, we'll all do things like that from time to time. So why can't we say things like bollocks if bollocks is the best word? Why do I have to pretend that we're somebody else? And that to me is where most mental health issues are stemming from. Just for me personally, I'm speaking from my own personal experience, you know, and people that I know, friends, family, colleagues, a lot of it stems from other people trying to crush you and form you into the shape that they want you to be, and not realizing that you're allowed to be yourself, and you've just got to find the place that you can be that person. So we all have options and choices. And that would be my message. Don't think that you've got to be a thing that you're not. Be, you know, learn who you are, and then just go and find the place where you can just be it.